Hello, friends. On this glorious day in drink history, my guest is Robert Hess. It's hard to overestimate Mr. Hess's contributions to cocktail culture. His blog, drinkboy.com, was the first real cocktail blog ever. He co-founded the Museum of the American Cocktail. He hosts The Cocktail Spirit with Robert Hess on the Small Screen Network, which in this host's opinion is the finest video series on cocktails in the history of the known universe. He authored the wildly popular Classic Cocktails column in Mutineer magazine, and he's just one of those people who has played a massive role in the modern cocktail revolution, and it's difficult to articulate the full extent of that contribution simply through his tangible projects. And at the core of it all is a genuine passion for cocktails. My mind is blown. Let's do this. This episode of the Educational Drinking Show is sponsored by Westland Distillery, which proudly makes American single malt whiskey. What is American single malt whiskey? Well, in the case of Westland, it's whiskey that's made in the tradition of Scottish single malt, but matured more in the American style. The Westland core range includes a sherry wood, peated malt, and of course, the flagship American oak. And these guys have been making waves in whiskey culture, with Whiskey Magazine naming them their 2016 Craft Producer of the Year. If you haven't had it, I suggest giving it a try. Good stuff. And now it is my great pleasure to share with you my interview with cocktail revolutionary Robert Hess.
As a kid, I remember this notion of bartenders. You know, this like magician behind the bar that was, you know, just taking all these little elixirs and mixing them together and making these wonderful concoctions, and also having this almost psychiatric presence at the bar. I mean, I don't know where this idea came from. I come from a minister's family, and so we never had any alcohol in the house, and so I had no experience with alcohol at all. Maybe it was, you know, movies and TVs and such that was doing that. And I just had this notion about these bartenders. They're magic, and you know, that's really kind of cool. And as I was growing older and prior to being of drinking age, I really got into cooking and cuisine. You know, watching, you know, The Galloping Gourmet and trying to recreate some of his dishes, and watching Julia Child and trying to recreate some of her dishes at home. And I got this whole culinary thing, and, you know, was really, you know, appreciating the fact that I could take all these things and mix them together. And then when I started getting to the drinking age, I got into wine and beer, because they kind of match well, especially since Pacific Northwest has a really good wine and beer culture. We had a lot of really good craft beers and a lot of really great wine up here. Back then, they were just being discovered by the rest of the world. And that seemed to be a nice culinary direction to go to. I could pair wine with what I was cooking. With cocktails, I would walk into a bar and my friends would be ordering beer, and I wanted a cocktail. I finally had a chance. I could actually order one of these elixirs from that magician behind the bar. And so I go up to the bar, and, you know, he's busy doing stuff, and finally kind of looks my direction. And, what do you have? And I realize I've got to order something. I've got to figure out what drink I want. And, you know, first time drinker, they really don't know what's what. I mean, it's you know, it's a lot easier to point at a beer tap of something you recognize, say, pour me some of that. Maybe you can't even pronounce it properly. And so, you know, I looked around and I saw he had a bunch of beer taps, because, you know, I just kind of panicked. And so I ordered a beer that I recognized and took that back to my table sheepishly. And all my friends are already drinking their beers already. And it's like, oh, this is really confusing. And so I basically kind of like pulled back from cocktails. And I said, that's just like, you know, not going on. And gradually, occasionally, I learned things like kamikaze was a drink you order, and so I'd order kamikazes or lemon drops, and I also thought that, you know, a little glass of heated brandy was kind of, you know, elegant, and so I'd order some heated brandy, even though I didn't like drinking it because the heat caused the fumes to come up into my nose, and so I'd burn my nose as I was drinking the heated brandy. But it's an elegant way to drink brandy, and so that was. but I never really got into cocktails. then I was in England once, and since we have beer culture here and they've got beer culture there, I made it a point to go to all the pubs I could and try some of their local beers and stuff. And I noticed that they had this, and this is like 1992-ish or something like that. I noticed they had this way of dispensing beer that I had never seen over here in America yet. And it's what's called a beer engine. And so here in America, they pour beer just by grabbing the little tap and opening the tap, and the beer comes out and closing the tap. These beer engines, however, you're muscling the beer into the glass. I mean, it's like those old style water pumps you see out on the prairie, but it's like, you're pulling the beer, and the bartender is actually using his own strength to pull the beer up from the kegs down in the basement into the glass. And I said, my God, that's really cool. If I ever had a chance to build a house myself, I'm putting a beer engine into it. And so finally, I got a chance to actually design some aspects in the house, and so I thought, gee, I'm going to put a bar in the house, and I'm going to put a beer engine in the house. And I want a soda gun. I want you push the button, and ginger ale, or club soda, or 7-Up, or Coca-Cola, or root beer. That'll be magic. I can just do anything. And an ice machine. I need an ice machine behind the bar, and a glass washer, and all those stainless steel counters and stuff like that. And behind the bar, that big glass thing with all the bottles back. Oh, if I've got all those bottles behind the bar, that means I probably need to understand how to do something with it. And so maybe I should look at cocktails again and figure out how to do something if I want to have those, so they're not just props back there. And so this was 1997, 80-ish, or whatever, and the internet was just starting to come online, and cocktail recipes were just starting to come online. And so I'd find a couple things here, and I had an old Mr. Boston's bartender guide at home that I had tried a couple times. Never really could get the hang of finding the cocktails in it that actually worked out well. And online, I happened to run into Hotwired's Cocktail Time website, and it was a wonder. The greatest thing about it was the fact that once a week they changed the recipe. Say, here's the recipe this week.
Whoa.
And they kind of talked about it. And Paul Harrington was the guy that providing the cocktails and the text for it. And then the next week it'd be something else. And so what I would do is I would take and say, what's the cocktail this week? And I'd look at the cocktail, look at the recipe. I'd check my Mr. Boston's book, see what its recipe was for the same drink. I'd check a couple other online sites, see what their recipes were. I'd maybe go to the library or the bookstore and check a couple of recipes. And so I'd have these 5-6 different recipes for the same drink, and I would buy what I needed just for that one cocktail. And then for a week, I would make that cocktail every single night and try a couple different recipes and try a couple of variations and see what I thought about it and kind of learn what was going on. And the next week, I would anxiously wait what the next cocktail was, and I would go out and pick the stuff I needed for that and make that cocktail. And spending 1 week at a time, not only was it a very approachable way of getting into it, because it was one drink that was curated. Someone had said, this is a good drink. You're not just randomly flipping through a page of a book and saying, this looks interesting, but someone says, here's a good drink. Spend a week on it. And so I did. And at the end of several months, I had a pretty good liquor cabinet that I had gradually built up over time, and I knew how to make a good drink with every single thing in it. And so that's how I got into cocktails.
Wow. Now, concurrently, it sounds like you were also exploring media and becoming a communicator, if I'm not mistaken, yes?
Well, yeah. I mean, so I was working at Microsoft at the time. And so at Microsoft, I was a bit of a communicator there. We ran what we call evangelism. And so the whole idea was taking information about our technology and helping people understand what that technology could do for them and get excited about it and share our excitement about that technology, because we were all real excited about it. And so one of the things I was doing was I was helping Dave Weiner down in California move his product Frontier from the Macintosh to Windows. He was strictly a Macintosh guy, and he decided he wanted to take and do some Windows stuff. We convinced him that getting Frontier on Windows was a good idea. And so I convinced him to get Frontier onto Windows. Frontier was a very early web development platform It was kind of geeky too, because rather than just being something that someone that didn't really understand code was doing, you'd actually could code into the pages, and that was a little bit on the new side from that standpoint. So it was like a coded database, and designing how things were built inside of it, and then you crank the wheel and out pops a website. It was designed so that you could actually run it on the web server, and it was constantly changing. Since I didn't have that option, I basically just cranked the pages out, took the pages and copied them up to a website. And I decided I needed to play around with this product that I'd helped Dave move across, and so I decided I needed to create a website. And I thought, well, gee, I'm kind of getting into this whole cocktail thing, so let me create a website. So I created the drinkboy.com website using Frontier, and started that as being my way of like getting it out there. I was one of the first. There were several other cocktail websites too, but I was one of the first cocktail websites that was really focusing on quality cocktails. Obviously, Hotwire's Cocktail Time was there before me, and I kind of like took that baton and moved on with it from there.
And about what year was that?
That was I think January 1998 is when I turned the site on.
Wow.
Yeah.
And then, so you created this site, and then what was your vision for it once you had it from an editorial and content perspective?
Well, I guess I didn't really have a vision for it. I was having fun. I mean, it was my way of playing around with the web, and playing around something that was kind of a hobby for me, and I wasn't really expecting to get an awful lot of attention for it. It ended up getting a lot of hits. I mean, this was in the early days of web advertising, and I had a couple of advertising firms that were specializing in doing curated ads on sites, and one of the companies contacted me and says, we've looked at the numbers you're getting on your site, and you could actually make some pretty good money on it. Of course, then the whole advertising market blew up right about then, and so nothing came of it. But I keep the site running. I haven't updated it for a long time, but it still gets a lot of hits.
And I mean, did that happen right out of the gate? Because people really saw it as a source of influence in the early days of digital cocktail media.
Well, I don't think it was quite out of the gate. I mean, I started the site up, and it was just kind of chugging along, and then the company that was hosting it for me, they told me, says, your site's getting more hits than any of our other sites. If we get rid of the second most hit site and look at all the rest of them, you're getting more hits than any of our other sites combined. I mean, it was a small web serving company. They had 30, 40 different sites that we're doing, but they said, you're always one of our top performers, if not our top performer on sites we're getting.
And how long were you active with the website?
I think I actively was constantly updating it for 5-6 years or so. I mean, it's been a couple of years since I've written another essay for it. I keep on updating cocktails on it. Anytime I run across a cocktail, they say, gee, I need to have this cocktail access. I'll put that on the site almost more for my own purpose than anything else. And I'll sometimes go back, and if I look at a recipe on my site, it says, oh, what was I thinking there? That's not the way I make that drink anymore. I'll go back and edit that cocktail. Part of the thing is there's, for your audience, this is a secret for them. There's a little back door on the site. Most people know it just as a computer version of the site they get to. There's actually a version that I've built that is designed for a web phone app, phone app, that it's, like I said, more for my own purpose. But if you go to drinkboy.com/mobile, that'll be the site that's built for phones.
And then when you have the site and you're bringing it to life, how did your relationship with the culture change, having the site and creating the content?
Well, a couple-fold. I mean, so my relationship with the industry changed in the process two different ways. One way was in building the site up and educating myself about cocktails. One of my experiences was after I started the site and doing the stuff and going through the cocktail time drinks and stuff like that, and I was making all these cocktails at home for myself. I realized that, gee, these cocktails really are pretty good. And of these cocktails, there's one drink in particular that I'd heard of before, but I never had. But my God, it's a fabulous drink. And that's called the Old Fashioned. I mean, it became my favorite drink. This is a drink. I love this drink. And my next time into a bar, I ordered an Old Fashioned for the bartender because I now knew a great drink that I could order in bars. And this drink slid across the table over to me, and it didn't look anything like the Old Fashions I make. It was all murky and muddy, and it looked even more watery than it should. It's just like swamp water sort of thing. And I took a sip of it, and it tasted terrible. And I was thinking to myself, gee, here's a guy who went to bartending school properly and learned how to make these drinks properly, and I'm just hacking away at home on this sort of stuff. And so why does my drink taste so much better than his? Am I doing something wrong that makes it taste better? Did I miss some step that the little secret handshake thing to make it bad drinks for people? And so I would go to bars and try doing old fashions, and they always came across bad. And I started paying attention to the way they were making it and looking at it and realizing that they were muddling all this fruit in the bottom and creating this slurry in the bottom of the glass. And then they were topping the glass off with water or soda or whatever. And it's like, oh my God, what? And so right then and there, I basically signed off bars. I said, if I go to a bar, I'm ordering beer and wine. I'm not going to order cocktails because these bartenders don't make drinks the way I want them. And I try as I might. I just couldn't find anybody. And then it was a trip to Paris where I was at Le Bar Hemingway at the Ritz there and met Colin Field. And I had a wonderful talk with Colin, and he had wonderful cocktails from Colin. And I realized, well, okay, so this bartending thing isn't a total mystery to everybody. There's at least one bartender that knows what's going on. And so I said, damn it, I'm going to find those bartenders in Seattle. And so when I get back to Seattle, I made a point of just forcing myself to go to bars and trying different bars and trying to find the bars that would make good drinks and get into that. And finally, I would find bartenders that, oh, here's someone that knows what they're doing. Here's someone that can make me a good drink. Or here's someone that has an interest in making good drinks. Even if they learn bad recipes, they want to do better, and they have that spark in them. And so that was the exciting. That was where I kind of really got into from the Seattle industry standpoint of learning who all these bartenders were and who can make good drinks. For more a global industry standard, that happened when I added the discussion forums for Drink Boy. And so again, this gets in the whole thing with my drinkboy.com site was I wanted to play the good Microsoft employee and experiment with this tool that I'd helped move over to Windows, and I just happened to do cocktails. About that same time, MSN had added this new groups thing that they were providing on the site, and I said, gee, I need to help MSN do some of their stuff, and so let me just figure out how this group stuff works, and so I'll create a Drink Boy group. And so I created a Drink Boy group, and many of the early people on it were like Gary Reagan, Dale DeGraff, David Wondrich, and some other people like that. And we just kind of like discovered that, hey, there are other people in the world that share our interest and enthusiasm. Because for a lot of people back then, there was no craft cocktail movement. And so a lot of these bartenders that had this interest, it was almost like an island unto myself experience, is that, okay, so I'm interested in great cocktails, but my fellow bartenders here aren't, or maybe they are, but the bar down the street isn't, and the bar down the street over there isn't. And so I have no place to express myself, no place to share my ideas and get stuff. I mean, early on, people might go to schools and things to share ideas, but bartending schools don't do that. Bartending schools don't teach you craft cocktails. They don't teach you good recipes. They don't even let you drink real alcohol in the classes. You're making colored water drinks all the time. But now, finally, with the Drink Boy discussion forum, all these bartenders around the world now suddenly had a spot where they could join like-minded individuals and help them share some of their thoughts and ideas. And so the great discussions were happening about, gee, what is the right recipe for a sidecar? Where can I find maraschino liqueur? Gee, has anybody been able to find good orange bitters someplace? And Gary would say, well, gee, I've got a recipe for making your old orange bitters. And so there'd be a whole discussion about how to make your own bitters. There'd be a whole discussion about who was the person that invented the Manhattan, and all these sorts of things going on there, which was kind of exciting.
Wow. And it's insane to think that wasn't even 2 decades ago.
Right.
That we've gone from like these little islands on the internet of ideas to a full-blown cultural revolution. And all those people that you mentioned have been so influential in that development. And it must feel great to know that you contributed a platform, for those discussions to take place.
Right. I mean, it just was a gradual thing. And all the people that were part of that group back then have, maintained friends of mine and stuff like that. And we still see each other at Tales of the Cocktail or whatever. And matter of fact, it was on the Drink Boy forum that I first ran across Audrey Saunders, who's now my wife. And so, friendships can be made and marriages can be made and things like that.
You should know that I broke into your wedding reception.
Oh, you did?
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, I was there with my managing editor and photographer, and we had tickets in, but they had let too many people in. So, like, there was a big line out front. So we just scaled a fence.
Oh.
And my managing editor lost half of his pants on the barbed
No.
wire. And we did the whole shimmy in, but we got in and got to share the evening with you guys. So that was a really, really fun evening.
That was a packed evening. I
Yeah.
mean, yeah. I think they let, a lot more people than they should have been there, but I'm glad everyone had fun.
Yeah. How did that even come about? The whole thing entails with you guys and celebrating the marriage and everything.
Well, so, when we were making our plans and like that, Anne approached us and says, hey, you need to have your wedding at Tails. And so, we said, that sounds a great idea. And Pernod Ricard was gracious to take and say, we want you to hold your wedding at Tails. And so we started brainstorming and we said, well, gee, what if we get, Desmond, the master distiller from Beefeater, and Sean, the master distiller from Plymouth, to actually be the officiators at our wedding, and that coming on. And then Anastasia Miller got Parthenon to be the person on stage doing the singing and stuff. And so he played us in. And it was wonderful.
That's amazing. Can you tell me about Small Screen Network and working with Colin and bringing to life your show on there?
Yeah, so Small Screen, I mean, and this, again, it's amazing. How many years has it been? 7 years, I think.
Something like
we've
that.
Been doing the show. And so Colin, out of the blue, just contacted me and said, hey, I've got this video company I'm working with. It wasn't called Small Screen then. It's called something else. I can't remember what it was now, but it was and their plan as a company was to take and do a bunch of different video things. Some of them would be web videos. Some of them might be actually videos that'd be on some of the lesser channels and so forth like that. And so he said, gee, I want to do a cocktail type show, and what can you do? And so we met down at El Gaucho and sat down having cocktails, and I can't remember what drink he was having or ordering, and I quickly schooled him and said, no, try this instead. Do this way. I said, and so he kind of realized, okay, here's some guy that actually does know what's going on cocktail wise. And so we started making our plans. Before we actually got the first filming going, his original company blew up and the different partners went to the wind, but Colin really felt strong about doing this whole video thing, and so went forward on setting it up. Initially, the plan was the show would be designed so that it could be a half-hour television show broken into spots also for the web if necessary. Mm-hmm. And so we did one episode that was in that format. And the format we use is where I would be behind the bar, and then I'd have a couple customers in front of the bar, and I'd be making them drinks, talking about a particular drink, and they'd be asking questions. So they'd be playing the role of the audience, the actual video audience, thinking about, gee, why is he putting bitters in that drink? And so the customer in front of me said, why are you putting bitters in that drink? And I said, well, here's why I'm putting bitters in that drink. And I explained things like from that standpoint. We ended up breaking that show. I did the old-fashioned, the champagne cocktail, and I believe the martini in that episode. And we broke that up into 3 separate episodes for Small Screen Network. And they became the first episodes we did then on Small Screen. And then from then on in, it's been tightly focused web-centric episodes, with the whole idea being something that is short and sweet. You're not spending an awful lot of time watching the show. You can just kind of watch on your phone really quickly on the bus ride or whatever. But I'm trying to always teach you something either about the history of the cocktail, or about the importance of the ingredients, or about some technique that this cocktail might possibly use, or pontificating in some fashion while I'm making the drink.
If you had to guess, how many episodes have you done to date?
I think I've done 200. I don't think all of them are still up anymore. I think, occasionally I'll redo an episode to, fine tune the drink, or just simply refresh the video. And so I think we then take off the older version of it. So it's probably all 200 are up there, but I think I've done around 200.
Man, the show's so great. You guys do such a great job on it. And we started working with Colin, and that's how he introduced us to you at Mutineer. And you started writing Classic Cocktail column for us, which really, for us, was the definitive Mutineer column in a way, because it ran for so long. And we worked with our photographer, Ian Andre. You had beautiful photography just for your column, and you did such a great job on it. So it's something that's always really stood out as something we were proud of to work on with you. So thank you for all of your contributions.
You're welcome. That's part of my cocktail evangelism.
Right?
Yeah.
What's that look like today, your cocktail evangelism?
Well, I mean, so right now, the focus is Audrey and I when we got married, Audrey moved to Seattle. She's kind of splits her time between New York and Seattle. She still runs the Pegu Club in New York. And so the Pegu Club was a defining bar in the craft cocktail movement. Prior to the Pegu Club, any bar that was serving what today we would call craft cocktails, because we didn't have that term back then, were usually very specialized bars. I mean, bars that you had to have reservations to get into or were super small. And so the Pegu Club was the first bar that was essentially open to the public. It was large enough that she could have a public audience, that anybody could just walk in and not have to worry about stuff. And so she'd have customers that had no idea that this was a great craft cocktail bar, and we just order cocktails and say, well, this is pretty good cosmopolitan, or whatever, and go on from there. But she always made sure she had that good focus on stuff. And so cocktails have been extremely important to her. And so when she moved to Seattle, I mean, cocktails being important to both of us, we need to kind of understand, what does that look like for us here? I had this house that I was building out in Duval that I had to put in mothballs from a financial standpoint. And she took a look at it and says, this can be a school. We can house enough people in here that we could actually bring people in and have a school here where we're teaching craft cocktails, craft beverage, like a finishing school. Like bartenders already are great bartenders. We can bring them in here and teach them how to be fabulous bartenders. Really teach them the fundamentals of what it takes to be a great bartender with great service and great technique and the product understanding and so forth. And so right now, that's our key focus is, what's it going to take to turn this house into a school that can actually get people on board with understanding cocktails and take it to the next level.
Oh, that's such an incredible idea. What's the timeline for that?
Hopefully soon. So we just finished getting our occupancy permit on the house, and we have some other stuff we need to do to turn it into not just a house but a school. And our plans are, sometime soon, have the announcements going out, the fact that we actually have this school coming. It'll be a rather small school. I mean, we're talking maybe 6 students at a time coming through. We're not quite sure what the time frame will be, how long they'll be there, but it'll be at least a week, maybe 2 weeks. More if we could handle that, but I think the big problem we have is understanding, what is the time frame that students can take away from their job or whatever, and so that's also a process we need to think through. But the idea is to take and make this a school that students from around the world are going to take and be able to come into and understand far better what it means to be a bartender and learn from Audrey Saunders the right way to make cocktails and the right way to take and present this sort of information and understand how to create new cocktails as well.
How is that not going to be the most sought after professional development opportunity for bartenders in the world? That sounds absolutely incredible.
We think it sounds wonderful too. Yeah.
How do you find yourself in all of these situations where you're able to make such massive contributions in such a obvious and simple way? It's just over and over again. You've done such profound projects that really resonate with the culture, and the timing on them is just over and over again. It's mind-boggling to consider.
Well, I mean, I think for both Audrey and I mean, we're just doing what we think needs to be done. Mm-hmm. And it's not like we're saying, okay, what's the business opportunity here? Where do we take and go? It's like, no, this needs to be done. This is exciting to me. I'm like, we're evangelists.
Yeah.
We're excited about cocktails. And so when I was first getting personally excited about cocktails, I just simply wanted to express myself on the web and starting Drink Boy. And then once I got into understanding the industry, it's like, oh, I want to do this. And the thing I'm doing, someone else sees and says, hey, come over here and do this as well. And I say, oh, that looks cool too. And we go over and do that. And so that's how I got involved in Tales of the Cocktail. And so I, was helping Anne from the practically day one with some of the stuff she was doing there with Tales of the Cocktail and help build that up and stuff. And then, Audrey was moving, she started at a small place, the Waterfront Ale House in New York was her first bartending gig. And then from there she got excited and she met Dale DeGraff. And it's like, she's telling Dale, I need to work with you. I need to help you. And he was like, okay, let's do something. And so Dale just did the next obvious thing with her and saw her excitement and moving from there to there. I mean, it's all about just like, here we are, and we want to do that. We need to do that, and we take that on.
Wow. Is there anything else besides the school idea that's on your radar of at some point I need to do that as well? That sounds really, really fun and would be awesome to do.
Well, I need to write a book. Another book. I mean, the first book I wrote, The Essential Bartender's Guide, was interesting. I was in New York with Jared Brown, and he was going to have a meeting up with, his name is escaping me. Why is it escaping me? Greg Bohm.
Boom.
So Greg Bohm, and me and Greg Bohm were in his office, and we're seeing all these cocktail books all over the place. And I was saying, God, this is really kind of exciting. And we started talking cocktail books. And then I was heading home back to Seattle, and Greg reached out to me and says, I had a client come to me, and he's needing a cocktail book. Would you be capable of writing a cocktail book? And this was like in November or something like that. And I said, sure, I'd love to write a cocktail book. And I went, how soon do you need something? How about by the first of the year? And so it's like, this is November, and he's wanting something by January 1st. And so, I basically, during my Christmas break at Microsoft, during that week, I just sat down and, took my brain and spewed it onto the pages, with a concept in mind. It was just kind of an entry-level, almost like a Mr. Boston's style thing, but with more information associated to it, a more curated set of cocktails to it. And there was still some loose ends at the, to do for a couple months on it, but basically I spent a week and wrote this book, and that popped out. But in the meantime, in the back of my mind, I've got another book that I need to write, so hopefully I'll get that out there soon.
What are some of the cocktail books that have really influenced you over the years?
Well, I mean, the fine art of mixing drinks, obviously. I mean, that's a book that, that you really can understand what's going on cocktail-wise. Granted, it's a blast from the past a bit. I mean, you're talking about from the 1940s, basically a guy that right after Prohibition, he was drinking prior to Prohibition, but right after Prohibition is what, he was getting into stuff. He wasn't even a bartender, he was a lawyer. And he decided the value of information, putting information out there about how to make cocktails, and so he wrote that book. And to this day, I think it's a great book out there for looking at stuff. I think Dale DeGroff's books, I think, are also very exciting. He has the Craft of the Cocktail and the Essential Bar book, and both of those really showing the insights of what Dale, one of the master mixologists we have today, what he was doing cocktail-wise, I think is really exciting too.
And when you have a new cocktail that you're not familiar with and you need to research it for an episode on Small Screen or whatever, what's your standard process or approach to doing research on historical cocktails?
Well, over the years, I've amassed a fairly large library myself of books, and so I'll usually dive into the books and first try to find out, okay, when does this first appear in print? What is the earliest versions of it? What are the variations that drink has seen? And then also take a look at which variations actually work right? I mean, because the original recipe isn't necessarily the best recipe. I think the sidecar is an excellent example of that. I mean, the sidecar appears in 1920, and in those days it was equal parts. Brandy, Cointreau, and lemon juice. And equal parts, it's okay, but it's not great. And so you really want to take and fine tune that. I think every bartender almost has their slight variation on what the sidecar has done, because it depends upon what type of cognac you're using, whether you're using Cointreau or triple sec for the other ingredients. And you can actually twist it slightly. Myself, I like a sidecar to be not a sour drink, not a crisp, refreshing sour drink, but more of a velvety, smooth drink. And so I've come up with a 4-to-1 ratio that I use. So 4 parts of cognac, 2 parts of Cointreau, and 1 part of lemon juice is the way I make my sidecars, and I think that's excellent. But I know that Audrey's sidecar is different than that. I know that Dave Wonders' sidecar is different than that. I know Dale's sidecar is different than that. When we were putting together the little cocktail book, little pocket guide for the Museum of American Cocktail, and I was editing with Anastasia Miller, and we came to the sidecar. It's like, okay, well, so what recipe do we use? And so, I kind of circled the wagons and got all the museum folks involved. Okay, so I want you all to, what is your recipe for sidecar? And every single one of them was different. And so to say, what I want you to do now is just like try to do a blind tasting and taste all of our different recipes and let us know which one you like. And of course, they all liked their own recipe best, because from a flavor standpoint, that embodied what they felt a sidecar should taste like. And a lot of it depends on what you get started with. I mean, it's like with Mai Tais. I mean, if you got started with a pineapple Mai Tai, maybe you think pineapple belongs in a Mai Tai. If you got started with the real Mai Tai that doesn't have any pineapple juice in it, you say, well, that's what real Mai Tai should taste like. And so you kind of have this big battle, which is the right recipe for something like that.
What's your perspective on the state of the Seattle cocktail scene at this point?
I think the Seattle cocktail scene has been constantly growing. It's not necessarily a fast grower, and I think the cocktail scene has grown in leaps and bounds in New York and other places like that. But the Seattle scene is a steady build-up. I mean, it's kind of a nice slow momentum to it. The Zigzag Cafe is still around. They were probably the first true craft cocktail lounge of a real note. I mean, there was one before them. The before them was Stars, which was my old chain of restaurants, and they opened up in downtown Seattle. They only lasted for a couple of years, if that. Their bartenders really had the oomph to them, and that was the first bar I ran into that says, wow, these guys really know their stuff and really are interested about it. But the Zigzag Cafe, that was a bar that really understood what it was like. I remember another bartender told me, hey, there's this place down the street opening up in a couple of weeks, and their bartenders are kind of cocky. And I said, well, what do you mean? He said, well, they say they can make any of the old classic cocktails. And, this was 1999-ish or something like that. And I knew classic cocktails that they couldn't make because they couldn't get the ingredients without really working hard at it. And so, on their first night open, I went down to the Zigzag just to kind of check out what's going on. I think I was the only customer at the bar that night, and it was, Casey was sitting at the bar doing books or something like that, and Ben was behind the bar being the bartender. And so I ran him through my litany of things, doing the old fashioned first, and Ben made an excellent old fashioned. And then I asked him for a personal specialty, and I can't remember what Ben made for the personal specialty. And then for the last drink, it's kind of, I usually say, I try to introduce them to a drink. It's not so much stump the bartender, but say, by chance, do you happen to know how to make an aviation? And Ben said, no, I've never heard of an aviation. Oh, aviation is made, blah, blah, blah. Maraschino liqueur, I don't have any maraschino liqueur. Oh, that's fine, I'll have something else inside, something else. Maraschino liqueur back in those days was almost impossible to get. I mean, there was a brand that was available in Washington State, had to be special ordered. It wasn't in the liquor stores. You had to know which liquor store someone had special ordered it into and go there and see if they had an extra bottle that wasn't being distributed to the person that special ordered it. The next day I stopped in at a Zigzag, and they had a bottle of maraschino liqueur. So in 24 hours, without knowing I was going to come back, they had the enthusiasm about cocktails that they needed to go out and get this product that they didn't have. And so they went and found maraschino liqueur and brought it in. And, that was the foundation of the Seattle cocktail scene back in those days. Those guys at Zigzag, and then bringing Murray into Zigzag as being their star bartender for many years, was what really kind of, I think, formed the foundation of what was happening. They're still running strong today. And then from then we have a lot of other bars. So Vessel came around. They were really great, and they were around for many years. Jamie then went on to open Cannon, which is another foundational cocktail bar. We have Rob Roy, which is originally called Viceroy back in the day, and they changed the name to Rob Roy, that Anu's running and doing great stuff. We have Liberty up on Capitol Hill, which is like an all-day place. It's got coffee in the morning and cocktails at night, which is and sushi. And sushi and cocktails, what a great combination. And there's a lot of, even some of the lesser bars that aren't necessarily trying to be a craft cocktail lounge, like the Great Nabob down in the Seattle Center. I mean, it's not necessarily a craft cocktail lounge, but they serve good drinks. And I think a lot of bars in Seattle have finally got onto the scene, even if they're not positioning themselves as a craft cocktail lounge and trying to say, hey, here's what we are, here's what we can do. They're still serving good drinks just because that's what they do in Seattle.
And finally, we're here broadcasting at Westland Distillery. I'm really curious to get your thoughts on the American single malt category as a category and what you think the potential is there, and just your general perspective on it.
Well, I mean, so one of the things that I think important, and depending upon who the audience is here listening to it, the concept of single malt can mean a couple different things to different people. A lot of people don't realize that single malt as a term is two different words. It's almost like you're saying one sentence, single, and another sentence, malt. It's not single malt. So single just means it's done at a single distillery. And malt means it's made from malted grains. And so it's not from raw grains, it's made from malted grains. And so a lot of the whiskeys being done, not only in craft distilleries, but even some of the big distilleries, are all single malts. because they're all made from a lot of them are made from singles. They're not blending things together. Some of the bigger houses are blending, but like all the craft distilleries in Washington State are going to be single distilleries, usually using malted grain. But the thing I think is exciting is just the fact that the whole micro distilling thing is picking up. It's almost not so much what they're distilling, it's the fact they're distilling and treating it like a craft industry. I mean, it's like when microbrews start first coming out, the craft beer market, all those people that were, home brewing and then realizing, hey, this stuff I'm making at home, my friends would like quite a bit. Maybe I should make a business of it. I'm really excited about it. I need to get it out in people's hands. And so we're seeing the same thing there going on, whether it's, Westland or some of the other craft distillers we have in Washington State, which Washington State has an awful lot of craft distillers. I think we have the highest per capita set of craft distillers here in Washington State than any other state in the nation, at least I'd like to think so. And they're all doing really good stuff. And it's just like, gradually they're moving the needle forward and making people proud of the local products that they might have available to them.
Well said. And thank you so much for taking a little bit of time and telling me your full story. And it exceeded even my wildest expectations here. I knew you'd done a lot, but to hear everything else and what is coming down the pipeline is so exciting. So thank you for all of your contributions to the culture. And I'm just so excited to see what's next.
Well, thank you, Alan. I appreciate being on the show.
Until next time.